episode 141, The Future of Networking. Welcome to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast, helping micropreneurs find your micro-influencer magic. I'm your host, Candice Rodarty, and this week I'm joined by the father of modern networking, Dr. Ivan Misner. Dr. Misner is the founder and chief visionary officer of BNI, Business Network International. Today, that organization has over 10,700 chapters with more than 290,000 members throughout every populated continent in the world. He is a New York Times bestselling author who has written 27 books. He has been featured in the LA Times, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times, as well as the BBC and on the Today Show on NBC. He has been called the father of modern networking by CNN and one of the top networking experts in the world by Forbes. He is considered by most to be one of the world's leading authorities on the topic. Additionally, the John C. Maxwell Foundation has named him Transformational Leader of the Year. Welcome, Dr. Misner.
Thank you so much. It's great to be on, and please call me Ivan.
Oh, I was hoping you'd say that. So, Ivan, tell us your unique story. How did you get to where you are today?
Well, so I'm going to go a slightly different direction. I'll mention, I'll talk a little bit about BNI, but I think it's important for people maybe to sometimes understand that when some people, when they've had some success, like I've had, that it wasn't handed to us. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And it certainly wasn't to me. I grew up in a very working class family. I was accepted to Occidental College with a 50% scholarship. The problem was I couldn't afford the other 50%. And so I had to turn down a scholarship, which means that I went to, which, by the way, was a great experience for me. I loved the community college that I went to and had some amazing professors. State university, and then to do graduate school, I went heavily in debt to go to USC. And so, I think that the message there is that you can't define yourself by where you come from. You have to define yourself by where you go, and what you do with what is handed to you, and how you move forward. And so, I got my doctoral degree at USC, and I kind of fell into BNI in that I needed referrals. I was a management consultant. I needed referrals. I put together some people that I could refer. I hoped they would refer me. I didn't plan on an international organization. I just wanted to get some referrals. People kept coming to me, asking me to open up another group because we only take one person per professional classification. And so at the end of the year, we had 20 chapters, and I wasn't even trying. And that's when I thought, gee, this is kind of interesting. I thought most people had this referral thing down, but they don't. They don't. They didn't then. They still don't. We don't teach it in colleges and universities anywhere in the world. And so that's when I sat down and created my plan to scale the company. We now have 10,800 groups, almost 900 now, in 76 countries around the world.
So it was always your plan to scale it this large? Once
I had that 20 chapter mark, I was like, okay, this is going to be way bigger than I thought. That was my Brody moment, which was in December of 85. So 11 and a half months after I started. Now, Brody, you remember the character Sheriff Brody in the movie Jaws?
Oh, no, you're going to have to dig into that one. I don't think I've ever seen the movie Jaws.
Oh, you haven't seen the movie? Oh, well, then I'll tell you. Okay,
tell me all about it.
Person I've talked to that hasn't seen the movie at some point. So towards the end of the movie, this is what happens. He's throwing chum out into the water to get this huge great white. They think it's pretty big, to come to the boat. And the first time, it's almost near the end of the movie, for the first time, you really see the shark. And it's massive. It comes out of the water, and it's huge. And Sheriff Brody is shocked, and he turns around and he walks up to the captain of the boat and he says, "You're going to need a bigger boat." And that was my Brody moment, was in December. I looked at how this grew organically, and I thought, I'm going to need a bigger boat. This is going to be a lot bigger. So I went to the library. I don't know if your viewers and listeners know what that is, but
we know what a library is.
Well, but I mean, people don't go to libraries much anymore. I had to go to the library to get population data. Today you got Monsieur Google. That you can find out almost everything about population data. So I had to go to the library and get reference books and research books to do calculations. And in June of '86, so a year and a half after I started BNI, I calculated that BNI could someday have 10,000 chapters. I thought it would take longer than it did. But I believed that BNI could have 10,000 chapters someday. And I remember telling a friend of mine, and this is now 18 months into the organization. I said, I think someday, I think BNI could have 10,000 chapters. And he said, 10,000. I said, yeah. He said, and how many chapters do you have now, Ivan? I said, 30. He said, you have 30 groups and you think you can have 10,000. I said, yeah, I really think we can have 10,000. And in December of 2020, exactly 35 years after I started BNI, it's now 37 years old, we hit the 10,000 chapter mark.
I think that's why folks call you a visionary. Because to be a visionary, you need to see way into the future. And you have to have your eye on something way in the future that most people can't see. That's what makes you a visionary.
Yeah, I think, it is about looking ahead. I meet people who say, yeah, I'm looking ahead to, next month. I'm like, okay, well, you might want to look a little further because times are changing constantly. We are going to be, we were certainly disrupted with COVID. It was the biggest disruption that I've ever seen in the world, but it won't be the last. There'll be more disruption. There'll be disruption in your individual businesses. If you're listening to this or watching this, there'll be your business is going to be disrupted in other ways. Technology is going to continue to disrupt business. And so we need to be looking, we need to pull out our crystal ball and be looking into the future. And when I say look in the crystal ball, I mean, read what's going on in business, in your industry in particular. Look at what's happening. And if it's in the beginning phases, chances are really good that is coming down the road. And it's not as hard to be a visionary as you might think. If you just know what you're looking for, the vision comes.
Lately I've been doing a lot of research into Instagram Reels because apparently Instagram Reels are where it's at in terms of social media influence. So I've been researching them because I'm a marketing trainer. I try to teach people how to do their own marketing. And most of what I teach is not social media related, but I try to keep my finger on the pulse of what's hot in social media. So this Instagram influencer says that what was popular 2 months ago isn't popular today. And I was like, okay, that is moving at the speed of light.
Yeah.
What works consistently for the last 25 years? And I know what my answer is for the last 25 years, why my husband and I, our little tiny, mom and pop business is still in business all these years later. I know why it works. But I'd love to hear what your take is. What is the consistent thing that people can do so that their business is always top of mind for other people?
Well, I think the foundation of everything I teach is a concept called VCP. It stands for visibility, credibility, profitability. You got to understand that. And when you understand that, then you can build a powerful personal network. You first have to be visible in the community. People have to know who you are. Then you have to establish credibility. But they know who you are and they know you're good at it. And then and only then can you get to profitability. The problem that existed 37 years ago with BNI and exists in the world today is that people use networking as a face-to-face cold calling opportunity. Hi, my name's Ivan. Let's do business. Yeah, and that doesn't work. Networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. It's about cultivating relationships with people. And so what has worked and what will, I believe, continue to work is understanding that it's really about building those relationships. That when you go deep, build relationships with people, they're going to refer you. And that works in person, that works online. I think it takes longer online, but it can work in both formats. And we know that because BNI during the pandemic transitioned all 10,000 chapters from, I mean, think about it, weekly in-person meetings to 10,000 online meetings. We did it within weeks of every country we transitioned as we transitioned them.
It happened almost overnight. I was actually the president of a BNI chapter when that happened. And one week we met in person, the next week we were online, and it was seamless. It was seamless.
I'm glad. I am so happy you feel it was seamless.
I'm sure behind the scenes it wasn't, but on my end of it, it was so simple. I just logged into Zoom and I was ready to rock and roll. You guys even had the slide deck ready for me.
Yep. Yeah, we did all of that. And we probably did it. You probably made that transition in March of 2020. By then, we'd already been doing it for 3 months. We transitioned China first because that's where the pandemic started. And then Italy was the next big hotspot. So we transitioned Italy. And then we transitioned Italy in early February. By the time we transitioned Italy, it was clear that this was going to be a global pandemic. And so then we started transitioning. By February, we had the slide deck and a system that worked reasonably well. Here is where the chaos came. People, you got to tell me if your chapter did this, because overwhelming majority did. We're mad as a hornet that we would make them meet online because this was just going to blow over. It's not going to be a big deal. Did your chapter get all upset?
There were particular members of the chapter who did feel that way, and they
weren't disruptive to the group.
I was the president of the chapter, and I was all on board because I've been living with metastatic breast cancer since 2000 something, 12 or something like that, and I was not going to be the person who took the COVID virus, coronavirus to the cancer center. I was not going to be that person.
Right.
So I just was steadfast and stalwart. We're doing this, and I'm not going to listen to anybody complain about it.
Well, see, that makes a world of difference, really. If you have a president who's running a chapter, the speed of the leader is the speed of the group. And so if you have a leader who is, no, this is the way we're going, it goes better. But we have people who were just mad. I would get hate mail.
So here's what happened. At the end of my presidency, I'm in Michigan, so BNI Michigan decided that chapters could choose to either go back to in-person or do a hybrid or do a blended meeting. And we were doing a blended meeting beautifully. We had about 12 to 15 people who showed up online and 12 to 15 people who showed up in person. And I actually was running the meeting from home, and people were there in the location. And then we were told that we couldn't do that anymore, that we had to choose one or the other, or do the, once a week in person, 4 weeks, or the rest of the month in online. And that wasn't going to work for me. So when my year was over as president, I decided to transition to a totally online chapter. Mm-hmm. And I happened to pick one that's in a completely different city than me. I live in West Michigan, and the chapter I joined is in Detroit. So it's 2.5 hours away from where I live. And it's a great chapter. And here's what's happened. That is a chapter that will always meet online. They call themselves we call ourselves a Michigan-wide chapter. And our mission is to embrace everybody across Michigan and be able to be referral partners throughout the entire state. Well, we now have a member who lives in Kentucky, and we really are across the state, and people are transferring to our chapter from chapters who've gone back to in-person because they've moved. During the pandemic, they moved to another location, and their in-person meeting is too far away for them to continue to be part of. And so they looked for an online chapter too. And so our online chapter is growing and thriving, but chapters that didn't have the enthusiasm about it
they struggle.
They struggle.
And so you have this chaos. Whenever there's change, there's chaos. So when we changed to online, chaos. When it became a little bit healthier and chapters had to start making a decision, chaos. And so we're kind of going through the third wave of chaos in just 2 years. And the chaos comes from what you just described. You had to make a choice. You made a choice to go online. And so that disrupts any networking group. So what we're hoping is that things just kind of settle back down.
Well,
And
once you
as they settle back down, we think that things will be less chaotic. Here's some statistics you might like.
Oh, I'm waiting. I like this.
As of today, first of all, 89% of our organization has made a final decision as to which way they want to go, in person, hybrid, or online. So of those 89%, 61.1% are meeting in person. Almost 14%, 13.9% are hybrid. And for those of you listening, this isn't just about BNI. This is the future of networking. 13.9% are hybrid, 13.1% are online. 11.9% are temporarily online. They're not quite sure where they're going to go. But they do want to. They're figuring out what they're going to do. I think the future of networking is probably going to be hybrid.
I agree. And for those of you who are not in BNI, hybrid means once a month you meet in person, the rest of the month you meet online.
Yeah. And inevitably, when the technology gets to 3D technology, holographic imaging, metaverse, we're going to see another transition to more and more online.
Well,
that's long term.
What was amazing to me was BNI immediately started doing things like speed networking and online events, online webinars. All this stuff was added. And the folks that were embracing the whole online took advantage of that. I mean, I speed network as often as I can. And when I speed network, inevitably, I meet somebody who would be a great referral for someone in my chapter. So it's a way that I can meet new folks to refer to members of my own chapter. And a lot of folks weren't looking at speed networking as a way to get referrals for their chapter members. They were looking at speed networking as I don't need to speed network because I don't have business outside of my town. So it's all about perception. And and then, on top of the speed network, the online speed networking, I started networking with other podcast hosts, and I started networking with other organizations. And inevitably, I always meet somebody when I go to one of these networking events that I can introduce to somebody in my chapter.
Yeah. And that's what networking is about. It's about making connections with people that you can make introductions. It's really about being a connector with people.
Exactly. Okay, so let's talk about the future of business networking. So we know that it's going hybrid, it's going virtual. It's that we're never going to go back to the belly to belly in person breathing on each other with our bad breath.
Well, I don't want to say never's a long time. And first, let me say. This is Ivan's opinion, not BNI policy. Because, inevitably when people hear me talk and they're a BNI member, they go back and they say, well, Ivan said, we're going to do this. Well, no. Right now, we're doing the choices. But here's the future of networking in BNI and beyond. If we want, and I hear everybody saying, we want more millennials, we want more centennials now, Gen Z, we want them coming into our network. Well, if you want that, you might want to take a good look at online because they do it better than people like me with the gray hair. They know online really well. And if we want to embrace them, that's a consideration. And when the centennials become middle-aged, that's when I think, maybe not even middle-aged, when they're scratching middle age, that's when I think the technology is going to be completely different. Holographic.
So by centennial,
it's going to be like Star Wars. Remember Star Wars?
Yeah,
you did see Star Wars.
I did. I was 7 years old.
Remember the holographic image of a Jedi Knight, and then
yes.
a couple of real Jedis, and then a holographic image. I mean, if not that, I think something like that is where we're headed. And
Oh
when
yeah,
we get there, I want to be Obi-Wan Kenobi.
you are. I think you already are. Well, you look. You could just put a hood on. You
If I
could.
just put the hood on, I think, all right, I need a lightsaber.
These are not the networking ideas you're looking for. Um, so I love that hologram. Okay, so centennials, that's actually you're the first person who has ever said that to me, but I'm assuming it means people born around 2000.
Yeah.
Which is my daughter. I guess my daughter is a centennial because she was born in 98. She just went off to grad school 2 time zones away. And do you know what? Do you know what happened? You know what I did? This is a testimony to BNI. When I knew that my daughter would be moving to Rapid City, South Dakota, I went on to BNI Connect and I searched for real estate agents in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I had a one-to-one with the one who had the best profile.
Yes.
Just to ask her questions about the city. I said, I want to have one-to-one with you. My daughter's moving to Rapid City. She's going to be, living near the campus. I don't need to hire you. I just want to talk to you about the city. And we had a great one-to-one. She was a great person. Yeah. So that's the power of a network like BNI,
Absolutely. Being able to connect with a BNI member in another area and ask them questions, powerful. One of my favorite ones was a story that I heard about helping a daughter was, I'm trying to remember the hurricane that hit the New Jersey area. Do you remember what that was?
Sandy?
Yeah, Sandy. Hurricane Sandy. Good memory. You haven't watched Jaws.
Not always. I don't always have a good memory, but that was a fluke.
It was Hurricane Sandy. So Hurricane Sandy hits New Jersey, New York. And interestingly, a BNI director's daughter, everybody was leaving the city. And they the gas stations had lines that were like 45 minutes an hour long because they were trying to get out of town and they were filling up. And his daughter was almost on empty. And so she calls her dad. Now he lives in Wisconsin. She's like, Dad, what am I going to do? I'm stuck. I'm in a line, but I'm never going to make it to the pump. And he said, okay, hang on. I'll call you right back. So he calls the BNI director, who puts him in touch with an auto repair shop, towing service, whatever, BNI member. And the BNI member says, I got this. He took a 5-gallon thing of gas that he had at his facility, drove to her, put in the 5 gallons so she could get out of town and get to a gas station that didn't have the huge lines. And so here's a guy in Wisconsin talking to somebody he's never met in New Jersey, who brings gas to a young girl, like 20-year-old girl, to fill up her tank. He doesn't know her either, but this is the power of a network. If you have a powerful personal network, amazing things can happen in your life.
And if you have a story like that and somebody like Ivan Misner tells your story over and over again, you can share that story with people and it gives you third-party validation, third-party credibility, which is one of those things that only BNI, well, I'm not going to say only BNI can do that, but BNI is a huge resource for people who need to build third-party credibility, especially if you're starting a brand new business. I mean, people could argue that, I don't have enough money to join BNI. BNI is expensive. I can't join BNI. This is my first year of business. And I'm going to argue that that's the it should be the first thing that you budget for when you're starting a business. When my husband and I moved to Michigan in 2017, and I joined a BNI chapter before we even bought a house, because I knew that it was the best way to join it, to build a network.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're trying to build your business, BNI membership is less than an ad in a newspaper. A 1-year membership is less than like a quarter-page ad in a newspaper. So it's like you got to build your business somehow. So what are you going to do? Go out and cold call? You're going to advertise, or you're going to advertise that costs money. And I'm not opposed to advertising. I think that's another tool in the business's tool belt. But networking is an important one, and it doesn't cost as much as advertising to be in a BNI group.
What do you tell people who've been in a chapter for 3 or 4 months and say they haven't gotten a referral yet?
Yeah. Let me answer that. But first, let me tell you, your daughter is definitely a centennial, also known as a Gen Z.
Okay. Yeah, the Gen Z is what I thought she was.
Yeah, Gen
I like
Z.
Centennial better.
Yeah, I do too. It's shifting from Gen Z to Centennial. Is anyone born from 1997 to 2012? And I think that's going to get bumped maybe a little bit more. But yeah, so she's a Gen Z or a Centennial.
Awesome.
Yeah, if someone's been in for 3 months and they say they haven't gotten any business, I'd say, did anyone tell you that you would get business in 3 months? Because if they did, they shouldn't have. It's unlikely. Now, there are certain businesses. If you're a florist, you're going to get business in 3 months. If you're a printer, you're going to get business in 3 months. But if you're a business coach, if you're a real estate agent, if you're a financial planner, no way you're going to get referrals. You have to go from visibility, credibility, then to profitability where you get the referrals. The thing is, credibility takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And so 3 months it's just the beginning. Networking is a marathon, not a sprint. Give it time. And generally that means a year or more, depending on the profession. You see, and I talk about this in a number of my books, there is something called the time confidence curve, that it takes a certain amount of time before people have confidence in your ability to provide a quality product or service. Some professions have a quick time confidence curve. Other professions have a longer time confidence curve. So depending on the profession, the time confidence curve just starts to hit the X point at about a year to 2 years.
So don't quit after your first year. You've got to have I love that BNI does this thing where they have 2-year renewals.
Yeah.
Because not only is it a good deal, but you really need to be in BNI for at least 2 years to get the full benefit of it.
Yeah.
When I do my thank you for closed business every month, this is my 5th year. And I think when I do my thank you for your closed business, inevitably 70% of it is from previous members or people that were referred to me by previous members. So, that I do every month. I go through and I'm like, oh wow.
So we now, we give referrals online. We used to do it through referral slips. I'm sure you remember those. And I have a guy, I got to reach out to him to ask him if it has continued, but he sent me in 2016, he sent me his stack of referral slips that he had for 6 years. So in 2011, it was a stack like that big. Okay. In 2012, it was a stack that big. In 2013, it was that big. In 14, it was that big. In 15, it was that big. In 2016, the stack was that big. And so he lined them all up and took a photograph with the years behind them. That is the way a network works. The longer you build the relationships, the greater the trust and credibility, the greater the trust and credibility, the more likely you are to get more referrals.
And it's a bell-shaped curve, not a straight line.
Well, a bell.
Not a bell. The opposite of a bell. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a J. What's called a J curve.
I'm not a statistician. I'm a podcaster.
Well, I like statistics. I've learned though that if you torture the data long enough, it'll confess to almost anything.
Oh, that's so funny. I saw an interview with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Do you know Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Yeah. Well, I don't know him, but yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Okay, so he's like my when I made my vision board of people I want to interview, he's like right smack in the middle of who I want to interview for my show. So I keep asking, do you know him? Can you introduce me to him? Anyway, I saw an interview with him recently where he was talking about scientists. And he said, when two scientists have an argument, they go into it thinking either I'm right and he's wrong, or he's right and I'm wrong, or we're both wrong, which is a way that nobody but scientists think. Everybody is either I'm right and you're wrong, you're right or I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, I'm right or you're wrong. No, but scientists, they think about the other answer. The answer that hasn't been thought of yet. Like we both have theories. Everything's a theory.
Yeah.
And so that's when you look at that, which is why you're a visionary, because I think that you have a scientific mind, you can see into the future, but you don't necessarily how you're going to get there, but you know that, I mean, what's your vision for 50 years from now? How many chapters are there going to be?
Well, we want to have millions of members.
Yeah. Yeah.
Within, within 25 years, we want to have millions of members.
You don't know
we
how
want
you're
to
going
be
to get
in
there yet.
we want to be in every entrepreneurial nation in the world. I mean, there are some nations that we're just not going to get into unless they change in some way, like North Korea. That's not going to happen anytime soon. But we want to be in every entrepreneurial nation.
Yeah, and I bet you Africa's growing like crazy.
Africa's growing. Asia is just on fire for being
every really cool new thing that comes out seems like it's coming from Africa. They're coming up with ways of recycling plastic and turning it into roads, and I mean, it's just amazing what the technology that's coming out of Africa right now.
I don't know if it's technology for India, but ideas, resources, products. There's a lot coming out of India.
There's a can-do attitude there.
Fastest growing country for BNI.
Yeah, and everybody's always happy. It's a very upbeat.
They're mostly happy. Yeah,
mostly happy.
I've seen a few upset people from India, but no, they're mostly happy. They're almost always very grateful, which is appropriate for your podcast. They're very grateful people. There's one other thing that I've seen about people from India that I certainly don't see it as much in Western culture. Is they have a thirst, an absolute thirst for knowledge. They want to listen to stuff, hear stuff, read stuff, watch things. They are a sponge for information and knowledge in a way that I don't see anymore in Western countries. We've gotten kind of fat and happy.
Where our thirst is for entertainment. We want to be entertained.
Yeah, I think from a business perspective and learning, I think we're a little complacent. I think we could do better.
It's the hungry people that have the most success. Oh, I might have to edit this part out later, but I'm going to make a controversial statement. I'm going to say that one of the reasons why immigrants are so successful when they come to this country is because they're thirsty.
Yeah, so I don't talk politics or religion. BNI doesn't talk politics or religion, so I'll stay out.
Neutral on that one.
Well, I'll stay completely out of that discussion because it's it's divisive in BNI to talk politics or religion.
That's true.
I can say my grandfather came from another country and was very hungry and learned 8 languages because he worked in a steel mill where they had many people from Europe who spoke different languages, and he was a foreman, and so he learned very simple conversational language for 8 different languages. And so my personal experience with my personal grandfather was impressive.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 C's of networking, your newest book, because I understand that no one's that you haven't talked about it very much lately. So let's.
I haven't. Yeah, it's literally pretty much a brand new book. It's called Work Your Network with the 4 C's, and the 4 C's are competence, credibility, clarity, and connectivity. Competence is, we talk about in the book that if you're not competent, you're not going to get referrals. So you got to be good at what you do. And we start with that C on purpose, because if you're not good at what you do, you're not going to get credibility. You could be clear and you could be connected, but if you're not good at what you're doing, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get referrals. So competence is the first of the 4 C's. You got to be good at what you do. And by the way, it doesn't mean you have to be in business for 10 years. When I was a management consultant, I was 28 years old. I started my consulting business at 26, part-time, full-time, 27. And, none of my clients were younger than me. They were all older than me. And so, the first thing that almost all my clients were like, "You're a kid. Well, what can you tell me about business?" And I said, "Well, let's spend a couple of hours together here or an hour. Let's spend an hour together and let's talk about that." And I would ask questions, get them to open up, give them some suggestions, and they'd be like, "Okay, you kind of seem to know what you're talking about." And then I'd get hired. And so you got to be competent. You got to be credible, which means, you have to walk the talk. The older I get, the less I believe in words and the more I believe in behaviors. And the way to become credible is through your behavior, not the words you say, the things you do. And, listen, don't get me wrong, words are powerful. Behavior is even more powerful. And the combination is a 1-2 punch for a successful business, which brings us to clarity, which is about words. You've got to be clear in who you are, what you do, why you're doing what you do. Why is it you do what you do? And you have to be clear about what you do in a way that educates people. I tell members in BNI, it's not about, you don't go to a networking meeting to make a sale. You should go to a networking meeting to train a sales force. You're training people.
Mind blown. Sorry, my mind is blown. Yes, you're going to network meeting.
You haven't heard me say that before?
I probably, but
yeah,
I'm over 50. I can't remember what I did yesterday.
I hear that. You're there to teach people how to refer you. That's why you go to networking meetings. If you are just out there doing direct selling, you're selling, you're meeting people and trying to sell. You basically eat what you kill that week. But if you're farming, you're producing business that will come to you without you even knowing. You could be on vacation and your office will get a referral. And so in order for that to happen, you have to be really clear about who you are as a person, what your values are, the kind of work that you do, why you do that work. Why is that work important to you? And then you got to teach them. And so in a case like BNI, where we're meeting every week, I tell people, don't say the same thing every week. Not even close. Other than your name and your profession, don't say anything else the same. Everything else you say every week in a meeting should be something completely different so that you're giving a little sliver. I say, make it like your business 101. So if I'm in a BNI chapter, it's my business 101. Here's one element this week. Here's another element next week. Here's a third element the week after that. Every week is a different topic. And you can do that in a network like BNI where they're meeting weekly, because over time, you're educating people how to refer you. Clarity is the third, and connectivity is the fourth. You got to be connected to people. And there's like two schools of thought. You got to know hundreds and hundreds of people. Yeah, it helps if you know a lot of people. But I would argue that you also need to go deep in some of those relationships. So if your network is a mile wide and an inch deep, it will never be powerful. So you need a wide network that in places goes deep, where you really have a connection with somebody. The old expression, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So here's my answer to that. I don't think it's either one. I don't think it's what you know or who you know. And here's why. Well, I'll tell you what I think it is, and then I'll explain why. I don't think it's what you know or who you know. I think it's how well you know each other that really counts. Because I have some amazing contacts in my phone. Amazing contacts. So what? The question is, could I call one of those contacts? Would they take my call? And if I asked them for a favor, would they say yes? It's not what you know or who you know. It's how well you know each other that counts. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They're trying to, meet, big names to do business, but they haven't built a solid foundation under that to get the referrals to the big names. Which, by the way, you keep plugging away with Neil, you're gonna get Neil's attention eventually.
Well, you know that it took 3 different people saying that they would introduce me to you to finally get introduced to you.
Wow, so why was it
the first 2 people say, "Oh yeah, I know." One of them was even a co-author of one of your books.
Really? Oh, yes. off air. I want to hear that. Who that is.
But it was finally Deb Davis who made the introduction, and Deb Davis is a member of my BNI chapter, and arguably we have the best relationship. So when you were just talking about the connectivity, we have the deepest relationship of the 3 people who said, "Oh, I'll introduce you to Ivan."
Yeah.
Deb is the one who had the deepest relationship, and she was the one who made the actual introduction. So there.
Yeah, that does support what I said, and I think that's true. Now, sometimes you're going to get a referral from somebody you don't know real well. However, for the most part, especially if you're asking for a favor, you got to know that person.
Yeah, but I don't think the first 2. It was sort of an offhanded thing. It wasn't a me on purpose saying it's time.
Yeah, fair enough.
I wanted to have you on for episode 150, but the timing wasn't right. And I kept thinking, I'm going to hold this in my back pocket for 9 episodes and release it for episode 150. And I thought, nope, I'm going to release it in the right order. So
okay.
You're a 141. But I was kind of waiting until
142 is a magic number for me.
Oh, is it? Well, it's already 141.
No, 141's fine. 141's fine. Well, 142 is seriously a magic number for me.
Why?
That is my astronaut number with Virgin Galactic.
Oh, how exciting. When is that going to happen?
I don't know. That's the big question, isn't it? Yeah. They keep saying it'll be this year. It'll be this year.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
I think it's going to be next year now. I've had an opportunity to meet Branson probably 8 or 10 times. And I'm going to see him again in February, March. I'll spend a week on Necker Island. He's a very interesting guy.
I know a couple of people who have been on Necker Island, and it's, from what I understand, it's transformational. But yeah,
it's amazing. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And when he's there, he's just as friendly as can be. He eats breakfast with us. He eats lunch usually with us. And sometimes he's there for dinner with us every day. Very interesting man and very friendly.
So one of my very favorite Ivan Misner stories is about the time that you were trying to get a blog post written while you were on Necker Island and something happened to you. Would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah, it was one of my very first blogs. And at the time it was associated with Entrepreneur, who I've been writing, entrepreneur.com, who I'd been writing for. I've started writing for them 20 years ago or so. And so my blog was associated with them, and I had a deadline. They wanted them on certain days, and it happened to be when I was on Necker. And back in 2007, so it must have been 2002 actually. It was 2002 that I started writing for them. So I had this blog that I started doing for them in addition to my regular column. And it was due that day, and I'm sitting there on Necker Island, and I'm stuck. I had no idea what I was going to write about. You know, for anyone who's a writer, sometimes you're just stuck. You don't know what you have writer's block, which is funny because Seth Godin says there's no such thing as writer's block. He said, "Do you ever met a plumber who said I have plumber's block? I can't fix this," which I think is hysterical. But you know, I didn't know what I was going to write, so I'm sitting there thinking, and up walks Richard Branson, who I only briefly met. Up walks Richard Branson, and he says, then you could only connect to the internet in the great room. Now it's everywhere, but in the great room. So I'm in the great room. He walks over. He says, "What are you doing?" So I have a deadline for an article. It's got to be done today, which means in the next few hours. And he's like, "Oh, okay, I understand. I get deadlines." He said, "Look, we're all out by the pool in the ocean. Come on out and have some fun. You know, find some stuff to do with us. And if I don't see you down there, sit next to me at dinner today." And, tell me more about this networking thing that you do. And he walked off, and I sat there and I thought, dang, how did I get here? How did I get here? Where a billionaire walks on up and says, hey, come on out and play. What are you doing? Let's go play. And then, sit next to me in the lunchroom. We'll have lunch together or dinner together. And walks off. And I thought, wow, how did this happen? And so what I did was I reverse engineered it. And it took 8 relationships. I met somebody in BNI, by the way, who asked for a favor, which I did, which then allowed me to meet somebody else and meet somebody else and meet somebody else. And I realized that networking has what's called the butterfly effect. The butterfly effect is part of chaos theory in division of mathematics that says the flapping of the wings of a butterfly affects something in the environment, which affects something else, which affects something else, which changes the weather. And the butterfly effect applies to networking because you never know, this person you're meeting might be able to introduce you to somebody who could introduce you to somebody who could introduce you to somebody who then, you make this amazing contact. By the way, it took 2.5 years for that, all those relationships, that introduction. And I called her name was Kim. I called Kim and I said, Kim, she was like, we haven't talked in a year and a half. What's up? And I said, Kim, I want to thank you for introducing me to Richard Branson. And I remember she like tapped the phone. Ivan, this is Kim. I don't know Richard Branson. And I said, let me tell you a story. And I told her the story. And she was just so pleased, which again comes back to gratitude, doesn't it? That when somebody does something for you that leads to something, that leads to something, that leads to something amazing, I believe you got to go back to that first person. You got to say, thank you. Thank you. That introduction, because it led to something that led to something. And at that event, by the way, I signed up back in 2007. I signed up for Virgin Galactic.
So you've been waiting for, I can't do that math, 15 years to,
yeah.
Wow. That's again, visionary.
But here's the thing. They keep saying to me, we're really sorry. It's taking way longer than we thought. And I keep telling them, no, take your time. First of all, get it right. They keep inviting me back to really cool things. So, I've been invited back to Necker for, it's a Virgin Galactic week. So they're all Virgin Galactic future astronauts. I was invited last year to go to Antarctica with a Virgin Galactic group. I get invited to see the rollout of spaceships. So I'm like, nah, you guys, in the future, there's going to be so many that they're not going to have that. Not at the same level for the astronauts. Now we can keep getting invited to the coolest stuff. So I'm like, take your time. It's okay.
I love it. So September 26, 2022, NASA moved an asteroid with a rocket.
Yeah, it was a pretty small one, wasn't it? But they moved it.
And it took 10 months. It took 10 months from the time that the rocket was launched to the time that they actually impacted the asteroid. Yeah. So 15 years to fly in space. I don't, get it right.
Yeah. Well, and this is a commercial flight. So you have passengers on there, and the FAA requirements are stringent. And this is a completely new industry. And they're using rocket ships that are, not real common. There's a airplane. It takes you to like almost 60,000 feet. And then it's the mothership, which is huge. And the spaceship drops down from the mothership and then launches. So you're already quite a ways up in the atmosphere. It launches, and then it's suborbital. So the whole flight's 2 hours. You're only in space for maybe 10 minutes, but you're weightless. And you're able to see the curvature of the Earth. I've seen photographs. Richard did it, and I've seen photographs of that trip, and it was truly amazing. It comes back down as a glider. So it's a glider with a gull wing that pops up, which is a unique technology.
It's basically a 2-hour amusement park ride where you get to be in space for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Okay, I have used up most of my time with you, but I got 2 more questions I want to ask you, and then we have to wrap up.
Okay.
So the first question is, what did you learn from being a black belt in karate about business?
I learned from my Shihan, who's a 7th degree black belt. So a 7th degree black belt and above in Shotokan karate is a Shihan, which is a master sensei. So when I met him, he was a sensei. He became a Shihan as I studied under him. I learned an interesting concept. He said, practice doesn't make perfect. Really? He said, nope. Perfect practice makes perfect. And so if you're going through the katas, which are a series of moves, you see Chinese form out in parks where people are doing Tai Chi, and that's the Chinese version of a Japanese kata. So he said, if you're just going through the motions on the kata, you're not learning anything. He said, look, I get it. You're a learner, so whatever you do is not going to be perfect. But you have to do it as perfectly as you can do it every time. And if you do it as perfectly as you can do it, with my guidance as you are learning, you will eventually do the kata perfectly. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. I thought that was something that applies not only in martial arts, but in business.
I'm so glad I asked you that question because I love that answer.
I don't think I have ever discussed that in an interview. And I do about 200 interviews a year. I think that's the first time I've ever told that story.
Well, that might be a soundbite for the future.
There you go.
Okay, so my second question is kind of gratuitous. I don't have a sponsor for my podcast because I pay for this podcast through my income that I earn from Send Out Cards. And I know that you know what Send Out Cards is. And gratuitously, let's talk about the importance of sending a thank you note.
Well, I think it's absolutely critical to send out thank you notes, thank you cards. I love Send Out Cards. I've been a fan of Send Out Cards for many years. Send Out Cards is mentioned in several of my books. So I've always been a big fan of Send Out Cards. But let's talk about gratitude using something like a thank you card. Gratitude is not New Age psychobabble. Gratitude is science. Harvard Medical School recently reported that they've had multiple studies showing that people who express gratitude are more optimistic and felt better about themselves. The Templeton Foundation conducted studies that showed that an attitude of gratitude can actually have a positive and lasting effect on the brain. A paper published by the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence concluded that expressing gratitude and a feeling of connection with others, something I'd say is probably pretty important in building relationships and networking, is that gratitude improves those relationships. I'll give you one more. Even neuroscientists argue that gratitude is effective. Paul Zak, who's a professor at Claremont Graduate University, says that the neuroscience shows that recognition has the largest effect on trust in a relationship. And that all comes down to gratitude. So gratitude is not New Age psychobabble. Gratitude is science. And I could spend another 3 minutes giving you even more scientific studies that I've read. I talk about this by the way, in one of my books, in the book Infinite Giving. I quote all of these. There's more material. And Infinite Giving is about the 7 laws of Givers Gain. Infinite
Giving is one of your best books. You have a lot of them. I mean, you wrote like 700 books, right? So
27, but who's counting?
But it really is, the more you give, the more you get. I mean, people who don't understand that, if your hands are closed, there's no room to receive. So when you give something away, it opens up your hand and more stuff can be put in your hand. So the more you give, the more room you have to get. Okay. So do you have a favorite marketing tip, tool, or technique aside from networking?
Yeah, I think business people who really want to scale a company and really want to be successful need to remember this. You want to be successful, do 6 things 1,000 times, not 1,000 things 6 times. And what happens all too often is that people are constantly chasing bright, shiny objects. They're doing 1,000 things 6 times. I keep this right here on my desk because I talk about this with some regularity. They're always looking for that. Oh, let's try this idea. Let's do this idea. Instead, you got to figure out what are the key performance factors for your business. And then you do them 1,000 times. And by the way, it doesn't have to be 6, it could be 5, it could be 7. But when you do those things and you do them over and over and over again consistently, one of the reasons why BNI meets weekly is it's about that consistency of connecting with people and building the relationships. I think it's probably one of the most important things. I see too many businesses doing 1,000 things 6 times.
That's excellent advice. All right. This is my least favorite and my most favorite part of the episode, because it means that it's my least favorite because it means that we've come to the end, but it's my favorite because I love hearing the answers. So would you please share a moment of gratitude? For whom or what are you most grateful?
Yeah, I think the person that I would be most grateful to in my life is my late wife, who passed away a couple of years ago. She was absolutely my biggest cheerleader. No one in my entire life. My mother would be the next closest. Elizabeth was my biggest cheerleader. We had an understanding. I made the living, she made the living worthwhile, and she did. It was an amazing relationship, and I miss her every day. But I'm very grateful for the 31 years that we had together. And I could add to this something we talked about before we went live on the recording. For as difficult as it has truly been, I also believe that your windshield is larger than your rear view mirror. That it's larger for a reason. That you have to look forward, and it's good to have that rear view mirror. You want to remember the good, and you want to keep an eye on the bad. I'm not going to do that again. That's in my rear view mirror. I'm not going to do it. And you want to remember the great things that happened in your life. Your windshield's bigger. And if you treat it like your rearview mirror, you're just not going to live the most fulfilled life that you can live. And we've all had difficult times during COVID. I lost my wife during COVID, and I still believe that hope is more powerful than fear.
Thanks for joining us this week for Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast helping micropreneurs find your micro influencer magic. Your time is precious, and I am ever so grateful that you chose to spend it here with us in this moment. Be sure to check the show notes at gratitudegeek.com, episode 141, for links to all the groovy resources mentioned today, and of course, to connect with Dr. Ivan Misner. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the show on Audible, iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast players. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Soul Lily. I've been your host, Candace Rodardi. Join me on my mission to spread gratitude, sow seeds of appreciation, and harvest a bounty of generosity and kindness. Stay groovy, my friends.
Groovy, you're the second person in 2 days to use that term, and it's like, a 70s term, 60s term. And I just yesterday, somebody said, "Hey, groovy." I'm like, man, I haven't heard that in a long time.
It needs to come back because it's a good word. Because it feels good to say it.
It does.
It
does.